All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming tonight and joining our conversation. We are going to, as you're sure you're probably used to by now, we're going to give it a few minutes to allow all the participants to join the conversation and give them a chance to get logged in for those who may have forgotten to register when they first try to click that link. So hang tight for just a few minutes and we'll get started. Thanks. And again, really quickly, for those of you who are trying to figure out if your sound is working, we are going to wait just a few minutes and let some of those extra participants who may still be trying to register join the meeting. So just hold tight and we'll get started in a few minutes. So I promise this is my last warning. People are still trying to come into the meeting, so we're just gonna give it one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks for your patience, everybody. Okay, I think we can probably get started. I would expect maybe a few more folks to be joining us. But in deference for everybody's time tonight, I think it's a good time to get started. I'm going to quickly, my name's Juliette Vong. I am with HBB Landscape Architecture and a consultant helping the city through this master planning process, and I'll be your main facilitator for tonight. So I'll help kind of keep our conversation going along and be helping to present the information. With me tonight from HBB is also Merritt. I want to say hi. You're still muted, Merritt.
Here we go. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Merit Ovir with HBB Landscape Architecture, and super excited to be here. I'm the project manager from the consultant team and moving the project and this through this master planning process through on a daily basis. So super excited to be here. Thank you.
And leading our process, our fearless leader from the city, Jen, you get to go next.
Hey there, Jen Burbidge, Director of Parks, Culture, and Recreation for the City of Lacey. And yes, like Merritt said, very excited to be here as well. You'll be helping us shape the northwest corner of Lacey. So this is a long-awaited project, a very large planning area. We're excited to finally be here and take a balcony view at these beautiful properties and determine how we can best and most respectfully provide access to these public lands. So thank you.
And also with us from the city is Ashley, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Smith. I'm the project manager on the City of Lacey side. Happy to be here tonight.
And then part of our consultant team is also Giselle. I think you can see her on her screen. Giselle, say hi. Giselle is with public engagement, and she's going to help us specifically with some of the live polling that will happen later on today. So you'll hear from her a little bit later. We also want to take this time to recognize others from the city and the park, the Board of Park Commissioners that are part of this process and will continue to be engaged with us. So it takes a fairly large team of individuals to not just host these meetings, but to really make these master planning processes a success. So we really appreciate all the efforts from the city staff and ultimately from everyone in the community who comes and helps support this process. So with that, we're going to turn this back over to Jen for just a little bit of history on how we got the name Greg Cuoio Park.
All right, well, thank you. It's my pleasure to do the acknowledgement for Greg Cuoio. On March 3rd, 2011, the city finalized the purchase of 400 acres in North Lacey to be preserved for passive recreation, educational opportunities, trails, water resources, and ecological habitat. With this acquisition, the city created the largest municipal park system within Thurston County. Shortly after, the council honored Greg Cuoio upon his retirement by naming the parklands after him in recognition of his 24 years of public service and contributions to the community as Lacey's city manager, which is no small task. Greg was very instrumental in negotiating and securing this land purchase, which would eventually become the city's largest park. And even though Greg is retired from the city manager role, he's still a very active member of the Lacey community. And I think I saw his name and he might be in attendance tonight. So if so, hi, Greg, thanks for joining us. And I just want to express my appreciation to you for all your hard work and dedication in making Lacey such a great place to live and work. And also with your continued efforts to this day through Lacey Rotary and personal volunteerism. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Couple little housekeeping measures before we get started with the presentation. We are here to guide discussion, so I will apologize in advance if you feel like maybe I cut you off a little early. We have quite a few participants. We're going to do our best at the end of this during the Q&A period to address comments and questions that come up. Hopefully we'll get a chance to offer you the mic and let you guys speak your mind and offer your discussion directly as well. And my job is to just try and kind of keep things moving along so we get as wide of a variety of input as we possibly can tonight. We're here to have fun. And along those lines, we do want to also be respectful of everybody else. So if you're the kind of person that normally steps forward with lots to say, don't forget to step back and give others a chance. And if you're the person that steps back, we want to hear from you as well. So please feel comfortable to step forward. If you're not comfortable being mic'd, that's fine. You can politely decline. And we do have the Q&A button that you see towards the blue box in the bottom of your screen. Most everybody, it should be in the bottom, but depending on what format you're on, it may be in a different location on your screen. There is no separate chat on this webinar today. So what we want you to use that Q&A function, whether it's a question or a comment, please add it into that box. As we go through the presentation, we might be able to address some of those during the presentation. Most of those will wait to the end of the presentation, and then we'll have a dedicated Q&A period where we can really start to have a discussion. Also, please remember this is recorded. You should see a little button or a little red dot somewhere on your screen that lets you know this is a recording. So if you're not comfortable with that, you can always feel free to log off and go to the website and have other ways of participating if you would like to make sure, if you'd like to not be recorded as part of the discussion today. And last, if there is a closed captioning, there's a little button. If you would like to see it, you can click on the little CC button. You see it on our screen, and that will give you a prompt of not official closed captioning, but essentially a live transcript. Not perfect, but it actually does a pretty good job of tracking the conversation for you. We are also at a very broad brush. This is a master plan process, so we're happy for any and all comments you have. We are trying to focus more on a visionary type level and not necessarily get down into the details. We do reserve the right to kind of mic and unmic you if we need to keep the conversation moving along, but we do ask you will stay muted through this discussion until we can unmute you in order to participate. So what is a master plan? A master plan is intentionally expressing a long-term vision. It's at that 10,000 foot level where we're really thinking about visionary ideas, programming, uses, what kinds of things you might want to have, what type of character it should have, what experience do you want to have in this park. Everything from hiking, picnicking, basketball, you can see a lot of different community events. It can be very physical or it can be very intangible, more like a character or a feeling that you want to have when you come to the park. We will also look at infrastructure, circulation. So yes, there's probably parking somewhere, restrooms, lights, power, water, all of that sort of stuff. Once we really understand the programming that we want to have at the park, we will also start to build in the infrastructure, utilities, and other supports, facilities needed to support that programming. But it is a guide to future implementation, meaning that our project does not end in a project that or an element or a design that can be built immediately. We end with a programmatic level plan for what we want to do and how it can be implemented. And then future phases will actually look for funding to build it and do the final design process before it actually gets implemented, which also means that there's lots of opportunity to participate. So even once this master plan project is finished, before any final design or construction would start, there would be a final design period and more opportunity for input as well. We want to go to the next slide. So our planning process, this is our schedule. So we are basically, you can see where we are here. We're in May. We have a series of 3 open houses that we're planning, probably all virtual, but as we get to that 3rd open house, hopefully we can intersperse it with some in-person activities and engagement as well. The goal at the end of the day is by the early part of next year, 2022, we'd be able to have a completed master plan process. And we will be able to keep you up to date all along on the website as well. So you can always go to that website and see where we're at. Which brings us to the next slide of how you can stay informed. So you can see at the top of the page here, the link to the city's website. On the website will be our clearinghouse. We will be able to track any upcoming engagements, all the registration links. Anytime we have an online survey, that's where you can go to find the survey information. And then as we proceed through the process, we will also use this as a clearinghouse for information that we have presented or summaries of meetings and activities and events that we've had. So if you can't happen to make a meeting and you want to know what was talked about or what was discussed, you can go to our project website. We are also always happy to respond to emails, questions, so you can see there's an email address as well. And if you want to stay informed, you can go online or email us at the city and we will add you to that email list. So we wanted to start with a little bit about where we are at. This is the city of Lacey, and as Jen said, our park is the boundary in red. We're in the northwest corner of Lacey, just north of I-5. And the city of Lacey, you can see in the orange, covers most of the park, but not quite all of it. So some of our park is actually in the urban growth boundary or in the county as well. This shows you it a little bit closer, so still the red represents our project boundary. And then if you can go to the next slide, you'll see that we're basically Carpenter Road basically splits our site almost in half. We have Hawks Prairie to the north, Britton Parkway, and the Gateway neighborhood kind of to the south. And then if you look a little bit further, our park is made up of more than just Great Cuoio. So you can see on our title slide on most of our material, you'll see Great Cuoio Park and Greenways. That's an important consideration because The area that we are studying with this master plan is beyond the limits of what is defined as Greg Cuoio Park. You see that in the darkest green on this slide. We also include Pleasant Glade Park because it's right next to us and pretty contiguous with, and if you're out on the site, you're not going to know where that boundary is from one to the next. And it includes Palm Creek headwaters as well. So overall, it makes for a larger system, and it makes a lot of sense to master plan the entire boundary and the entire site as one environmental system. Within that system, there's a series of protected water conservation rights. So there's about 20 acres you see in blue on this slide. That is a protected water rights conservation area that will have limited access directly to it, although we are looking at and supporting education, monitoring activities, other kinds of organized sort of escorted purposes to maybe go into that area. There is also a lot of wetlands, a lot of streams, a lot of other natural systems that are protected by a variety of areas, and we'll get into kind of showing you what those look like a little bit later. We do know that there was a previous conceptual design done for Pleasant Glade Park. It had some great ideas, and I know some of the improvements have been built to make it an open park to the community. We want to basically build on that planning process, on those concepts, and look at what of those concepts still make sense for Pleasant Glade Park. What of those really make sense to expand into other areas of Greg Cuoio Park, and how can we best connect these two parks together? And so we are moving into our first live poll. So we'll see how this goes. Giselle is going to join us here and walk us through how this works. So I will give you a heads up. If you have a phone, get it ready. And if you're going to just be using your laptop or a tablet, you can kind of have that ready as well. We'll give you plenty of time to get through this so you can join us. Giselle?
Hi, it's great to be with you all this evening. You'll see this slide pop up a few times throughout this presentation, and that's sort of a cue that we're moving to a more interactive part of the presentation. If you're joining by audio only or your device doesn't support multiple platforms, don't worry, don't feel left out. This is really just a casual way to be hearing from people. There will be an official survey that you can access. If you're comfortable and familiar with QR codes, you could use the camera on your smartphone to just scan the little black and white symbol you see in the bottom of your screen, and that will launch the platform for you. You could also type in the URL that is shown as under live polling link, and that will take you to the website. I'll say it each time, but it might be worthwhile to refresh your browser. Sometimes it doesn't keep up with me changing the slides. So that's just a heads up for that. So with that, I'll share my screen and take us into the questions platform.
So while she is sharing her screen, we will be monitoring the Q&A box. If you are having trouble, you can always put something down in the QA box. We might not be able to help you figure it out independently. We'll certainly try. If you find you can't access it and you still want to just put your answer or have a comment, just put it in the QA box and we'll be able to track that as part of the overall meeting discussion.
Okay, here we go. So the first question is, we're really curious to find out how you found out about today's meeting. We are hoping to continue to keep everybody involved and want to invite people. So we want to know which methods are working really successfully. So did you hear about today's workshop from a flyer? Did you stumble upon it on the website? Are you a frequent reader of the city newsletter and you saw it there? Or maybe it's none of those and you found out from another source. We just want to know, how'd you get your invite today? And I'll give it a little bit of time so while people are launching the platform and getting familiar with the tools and learning how to navigate it. And as you can see, people's answers are coming in real time.
And Giselle, did you want to drop the link into the chat? There is a couple of questions that have just come up wanting to see that link as a direct.
Absolutely.
You could put it in there and you will see, everyone should be able to see a response. We'll just respond to the first question that came up. You should hopefully be able to find it.
Thank you to those of you who are putting it in the Q&A as well, your answers.
If the QR link didn't work, you can also try just typing it into your browser. We've tested this a number of different ways, and those of us trying, sometimes some ways worked better than others. So it really just depends on what device you're using.
And if you were on a different slide, try refreshing, and it should bring you back to the one that I'm currently presenting. And some people, it asks you to enter into a special code. I've included that code in my response on the answered questions.
Looks like people are being able to access it. What I love about this is it tells us up in the little corner here, 34 people have responded so far. So I think it's super fun to watch all the numbers change as you go along.
There we go.
And it does look like a pretty even distribution, at least for those who are able to participate so far.
I saw somebody wrote in the Q&A that a friend told them, so I hope you all will tell your friends about the future events and keeping an eye on that project website.
Sometimes old school word of mouth is the best.
I'll give it one more minute before I move us along to the next question. And you don't have to retype in the URL each time when we come back to the questions. You can just refresh, so you can save that step the next time. Okay, it looks like other is winning with, ooh, city newsletter and printed flyer just did a little swap at the last second there.
Because it's a total competition.
Okay.
Other
And
ones.
now a question that's a little bit more specific to this master plan. So we'd love to know a little bit about how you're prioritizing things. So we're asking you to rank your park and greenway priorities from the most to the least important. And just for people who are following along and are not able to participate, I know the text is a little bit small, so I'll read them out loud. We have conservation and environmentalism, recreation, play, and adventure, spaces and amenities for passive or leisurely activities, accessible paths, trails, and site furnishings, programming and events, and community gathering. So you can see how people are starting to enter in their rankings. This one takes a little bit longer since you have to move through all 6 choices, so we'll give it a little time.
If you're like me, you change your mind often too. So I was able to resort them and at the end. And my answers are not in here now. This is just when we were trying to test everything out. Can we, Giselle, can you type in or put in an anonymous attendee had asked for the link again to join the live poll?
Oh, sure.
And as we go through this, we're going to go back to our presentation when we get through a couple of these questions. Keep your web browser up, keep it up on your phone. You'll be able to join it back in because we do have some more of this later on in our presentation. We will also show you the link and do the new QR code for you as well. So hopefully lots of ways to join. Couple more minutes maybe. Looks like we're neck and neck on second and third if anyone wants to try and get their last their last input in.
Give it one last minute because I know a few people wanted the link again, so.
And I'll also say that as we kind of go through this, if you're voting for something that maybe is fifth and not first, it doesn't necessarily mean that any of these are not important. It just really helps us get a sense of where some of the priorities might fall. And it's also, we recognize it's kind of a snapshot at this point in time and just representative of the people on the call. What you'll find when we're done with this meeting is we have a link to an online website or an online survey that will ask some very similar questions. Even though you participated here, we still ask you to go and fill out the formal survey as well, because that will capture not just people who attended this meeting, but anybody else in the city who was not able to attend the meeting. So you'll find throughout this process, we're trying very hard to think of multiple ways for people to give us their feedback and feel like they're able to participate and give us their ideas.
Okay, it feels like it's settled in there. So now that you've learned a little bit about Greg Cuoio Park and Greenways, and you can think about parks that are like it that you've experienced in Lacey or other places, what is something that you like most about that? There's no wrong answer. You could pick the first words that come to your mind. They can be aspirational or really familiar and something you feel strongly should be consistent throughout the system. I love that we have a nature crew here today. Conservation environmentalism was up there. We got nature in the word cloud and somebody wrote it in the Q&A. So you're in the right place, it seems. I also am so curious if sport dog is one thought or two ideas sharing a line. It could be pretty cool either way.
As well, Giselle's experience comes in handy. It moves so much. I see the bigger words, but she can pick out all the smaller ones that are just as important.
These are great ideas, and we will save and download all the things that you're inputting into the platform when we're done today, so we won't lose any of these ideas, as well as the ones that are showing up in the Q&A.
Love it.
There's still some coming in, so I'll give it another minute.
I think escape is a fun one. That's both a thing as well as a feeling, right? It kind of gives you a sense of freedom when you have a space like this that you can go to and walk through. Having been in the middle of the park too, it really does feel like you're in a different world.
This is a really great mix. We have things from social context to environmental to protection, and even just more community focused ideas for people and to enjoy places, and seclusion, I think I saw, and inclusion.
There's some number of comments on wildlife. I'm sure for those of you who live in the neighborhood recognize how much wildlife is in this park.
And a little pickleball battle in the comments. We have pickleball and no pickleball. Okay, great.
You do get to watch it go back and forth when you're participating in pickleball.
Okay.
I liked the forest vibe.
I like it also when you see how many people are trying to respond at the first time, how quickly the words start moving until it settles down a little bit again.
It looks like we're in a good place to pause. So with that,
Pickleball, nature, running, preservation, animals. I think there's lots of good content here.
yeah, these are great. And we know everybody is awake and paying attention too. So that's always exciting.
All right.
Okay. And I think with that, we can move back into the presentation. We have a few other questions that'll pop up throughout.
So give us just a sec to transition.
Yeah, just a sec. Hold on here. Sorry about that. There we go. Let me know when you see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. So now we are transitioning into site analysis, and we'll talk about what we've found, and we talk about this site. We have the consultant team has been on the site with the city and without the city. We had a lot of ground to cover since the park area is over 500 acres. And during those multiple site visits, we looked at connectivity, access point, connections, and circulation through the site. And also all the environmental aspects and the natural features that are all present on this site. But before we go deeper into site analysis, it is important to also know that City of Lacey purchased some of the park land with grant money from Recreation and Conservation Office. And those of you who are not familiar with Recreation Conservation Office, they are an organization in the Washington state whose mission is to help secure opportunities for outdoor recreation. So they have an extensive grant program available for municipalities and community groups and other groups to help secure funding for their projects. And like City of Lacey was successful getting a grant from RCO to purchase some of the land for the park, those grants also come with terms and conditions. So future uses on the land that has been purchased with grant money needs to be reflective of the uses that are in line with those grant terms and conditions. And that applies both to the area that's highlighted in green, what we've labeled as RCO purchase, and also the area on highlighted in orange, which is RCO conversion. And the protected water rights conservation area, Juliette already covered in more detail on previous slides.
And I will quickly say, as we're going through this presentation, don't worry if you can't read the text on the images themselves. This presentation will be online, and so we added extra text in here so that if someone were to look at it afterwards, they can see what we're talking about. But we'll talk you through everything, so it's okay if you can't read it all.
Okay, and now we'll just cover with a couple of next slides some of the more specific analysis from our work. We're starting off with neighborhood access. We know that there are a number of smaller neighborhood access points around the park perimeter. One of the more formalized access points is at the west, towards the west end at Pleasant Glade Park. And depicted on the graphic on the left, there's the potential future locations, access points, also existing access points. But we do recognize that a main access point and parking will likely be off of the Carpenter Road, and that's shown on the larger circle right in the middle of the graphic. We looked at connectivity through the park site, some of the desired connection lines, and while connections are easier to get established through the natural and wooded areas of the park, the bigger challenge that the project team will be looking at in more detail is the connection across Carpenter Road. We do want to make sure that it's safe for all park users because of the higher speeds that we see cars traveling and some of the limited sight lines coming down the slope. It's really important to explore a few different alternatives and see what we can do to make it safe.
That's probably a good time to also point out the extension or proposed extension of 31st Avenue. And so if you're not familiar, 31st Avenue is kind of, you see the large area of new development off to the right-hand side there. 31st Avenue is along the north edge of that boundary. So there is a city project proposed to extend 31st Avenue and connect it to Carpenter Road. Exactly how and where that connection happens, whether it swoops to the south or goes straight across, there's exploring a number of different alternatives. We are going to be coordinating with that process. I think we're a little ahead of them even potentially. So as we kind of develop concepts and ideas for this process, we will be looking at different ways for that 31st Avenue connection to come into Carpenter and see how that supports a desire to get access and circulation across Carpenter for the park as well.
Thank you, Juliet. And with that, the potential trails. We know that there are a number of informal trails already present through the various parts of the park. And what this master plan is looking is creating those connections to be able to, get from one end of the park into the other, or perhaps have a loop that's more convenient for those who want to do jogging or walking their dogs. So we're just looking at a more connected trail network as an overall result of this master plan.
If you remember when I said visionary, even the lines on the plan are really schematic. So you'll notice one goes outside the boundary and comes right back in. It's really just showing a desire to go from point A to point B, not necessarily exactly that route is going to take. Part of what we're going to do as part of the master plan is dial in a little bit more clearly where and how we want these connections to go. And that'll be part of our discussion today.
Hey, Juliet and Merritt, maybe this is a good chance just to recognize a question or a comment that we have. Could you explain the symbology on the graphic? Are the yellow circles access points? Is that what that means?
Correct, yes. Yellow circles are noting those access points.
And they're potential access points. They're not all there right now. They're just spots where it seemed like you might be able to connect to a neighborhood or a community point. In some cases, some of them are a little bit more obvious where it seems like there is something or maybe some natural trails that have already developed. In other cases, like over in the Woodland Creek neighborhood, over kind of by that new development, those couple of circles over there has absolutely nothing there now. It's really just to prompt discussion about where and how we might want to connect into the different communities. And at the end, some of these might make sense and some of them might make absolutely no sense and just not even be part of the master plan.
Great, thank you for that.
And with that, we get to the next polling question.
Sure, I will just remind you that if you go into the answered questions, you can see the link if you need to click on it again, or you could, of course, refresh your page if you have it's opened still. So our next question is keeping connections in mind. We just saw some potential ideas or places that we're thinking about connections. Some of these are by walking connections, some of them are just visual, some of them are transit oriented. So I think just thinking about what connections are important to you, this is an easy either or choice. Give it another second as a few more start flying in. It looks like your comment about loop trails, Merritt, is resonating with the group, though. Great.
I'll also say, as we talk about connections, they don't all have to be vehicle connections. They don't have to be parking lots. They don't have to be trailheads. Some connections are just pedestrian and intended for the neighborhood. Others might be more formal or have parking, like we said, off of Carpenter Road. So as you're kind of thinking about your neighborhood and whether you'd like to see some connections to the neighborhoods as well, or where those might make sense, keep in mind they don't all have to involve parking.
That's a great point. Okay, I think we have a break to go back to the presentation now. And I'll pop in one more time this evening with another question.
Thank you, Giselle. And we'll carry on with more site analysis. The project site has a nice rolling landscape. We have high points and low points, and high points provide great view opportunities depicted here on this slide. And the next one are just a couple of views that you get from the central open grassland area just west of Carpenter Road. But we do recognize there's a great high point at the Pleasant Glade Park trailhead, which allows great views, and also the south end of the project site just east of the Carpenter Road provides some really great view opportunities. When the high points are great for views, the valleys that are formed in the lower portions of the terrain are a home to Woodland Creek, as well as its tributaries that flow through the project site. And we can't really look at the creek and the rest of the system. We can't just pull one element out of it. We do have to also look at the wetlands because they're so intertwined with each other as a holistic hydrology system, and they just function together. So the squiggly lines here on the graphic on the left represent rough boundaries of the wetlands. And now if I go to the next slide, the orange overlay indicates the wetland and its required buffer limits. And the green indicates the shoreline buffer limits on Woodland Creek. The tributaries also have a little bit of a buffer. It's not currently shown on the graphic, but it really paints a good picture about how much of the project area is outside of those sensitive areas. And it's not like the buffer areas around wetlands and the streams, it's not like those are completely off the limits, but it is important to understand that there's still a variety of passive recreation activities that can occur within the buffer areas. And just to wrap up site analysis, the project site really offers a very diverse range of different habitat types. We have upland forests, we have wetlands, we have open grasslands, and areas with more denser understory planting. And all those riparian zones provide a high value ecosystem for plants, animals. And it's really, as we see the development and density, all those urban environments getting denser and denser, it's just really rare to see this continuous forest, and just recognizing the value of it. So it really, the project site really is a gem within this urban area. And I think one of the challenges for the master plan is finding a great balance for the proposed programming and activities on site, and then between the sensitive nature of the site itself. And with that,
very much so. I think that balance is going to be probably the more engaging part of the discussion, and one of the challenges that we're definitely going to have. But it's also part of what makes these sorts of parks just truly unique, is to be able to allow people to experience it. And some areas will probably be protected and off limits, and other areas will be invited to understand and educate and experience. And so we do have a lot of folks on our team that can really help us define that balance, so we protect the right places and allow access where it makes sense to allow access. What we wanted to do quickly in this next phase is just take you into each of these areas. So these numbers represent what we're calling opportunity areas. It does not mean that there isn't going to be some trail or something happening outside of these opportunity areas. These are just the areas that either were truly kind of unique, or had some space available, had some opportunity outside of all of the sensitive areas that we could maybe think about different amenities to occur. And so it just helps us start to organize our thoughts around the park. When you're dealing with 500 plus acres, it really does give us a chance to sort of get our arms around these different zones. So we're going to quickly just kind of show you some photos of each area in a greater, kind of a bigger scale. So this is area 1, this is really kind of focused on the one connection point that we have between kind of the main bulk of the Great Cuoio Park and that second area that's closer to the Hollywood Hills neighborhood. You can see there is a spot where our properties connect, and that's at the cul-de-sac at the end of Pleasant Glade Road. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. The second area is at Pleasant Glade Park itself. And so you can see here the improvements at Pleasant Glade, and that's really kind of an interesting and an opportunity to connect and get better access from Pleasant Glade to the rest of the park as well. Area 3 is kind of that open space. This is a lot of that RCO that Merritt talked about originally. RCO does allow some recreation, both recreation and conservation. So there are some wetlands on this area as well, but there's also some uplands. This is an open kind of pasture, old pasture land. So you can kind of visualize some different opportunities if there's going to potentially be some activities, gathering areas, that sort of thing. Here's a nice open space that is outside some of those protected zones that we could potentially have some amenities. Area 4 is on the hillside just above the pond that you see to the east of Carpenter Road. And so the pond and the kind of, there's the farmland that's still part of the private property. Our park starts kind of on that hillside up above that you see in this photo. And there's some opportunity here as well. There is a lot of wetland in the area, but it's a great opportunity to connect from the open space in area 3 and to try and kind of get some of that connection over to the next area, which is area 5. Is this kind of really beautiful, mature forested land. There are some existing trails through this space. There's some open space and some little pockets of areas that have a little bit more open space than others. But this is also a good opportunity area to connect to neighborhoods and provide some trails and to think about some different types of activities maybe associated with those trails that we could think about.
And let's talk about some of the potential programming. So today's workshop is really focused on the visioning. So the handful of next slides are just showing you a number of images that we've gathered to provoke some thoughts, provoke some discussions, get a sense of what feels like it would be a good fit for this park, and some of the activities we might get reaction and hear from you that, oh, this is certainly not here. So it's really just kind of getting the temperature check and like what feels right, what doesn't feel right, what feels like it fits with the character of the site. And also if you have thoughts about for some of those specific activities or programming elements, like if you want to get site specific, make sure to take the survey, the online survey. The link will be at the end of the presentation, and participate. Let us know your thoughts. We're really curious to get the input from you guys because you are the local community. So let's dive in. We have top left, we have bird watching, nature watching, just enjoying nature, real passive, but plenty of opportunities this site offers. Bottom left, maybe there's somewhere a track in the woods for mountain biking. Dog off-leash area with getting the urban environments get denser and denser. We've seen a really big demand for a dog off-leash area. And a fun fact for everyone to know, if dog owners are more likely to keep their dogs on leash if they know there is a designated off-leash dog area nearby. So if we're talking about putting it in the context of this sensitive site, it could really help if there's a designated area for dogs to run loose. And then just trails, like Juliet mentioned, trails for all users, paved trails for those who need to use a mobility aid, families with small kids, or more soft surface trails that are, from a permeable material. And then if we're looking at kids' play area, maybe a nature play or play equipment from natural materials might be a better approach and go better with the character of this particular park site versus a colorful equipment from a catalog. Open lawn can provide a variety of flexible uses for family activities, community events, etc. So flying a frisbee, flying RC airplanes, disc golf, it can go into the wooded areas, it can come out back into the open grassland. Perhaps there is an obstacle course or a zip line somewhere in the woods. And one of the ideas that we have also thrown around is having an environmental learning center located somewhere within the park boundary. And again, if you think about this particular site and how much richness it offers from the biological and ecological perspective, having the place for those organized groups to gather and go explore on site, and really it would really be a great opportunity. So just food for thought, something to ponder about. And then image on the bottom right shows an amphitheater. There's many scales and many sizes and many ways to do this, but amphitheaters generally provide a great space for the community to gather, just celebrate different events within the community, holidays, gatherings, outdoor festivals, etc. So something to just throw out there. So top two images show how public art and art can really help build and reinforce community identity. We see it often integrated into park designs and also elsewhere on different types of projects. We know that the project site has quite a bit of topography. We have Woodland Creek and its other tributaries flowing through the project site. So it is likely that we may need smaller structures to cross some of those waterways. So it's not unlikely that we may need to integrate one to a few of the smaller pedestrian crossings over those creeks. And bottom left, we have an image of a gazebo, a pavilion that can really provide a place to, seek shelter from a rainy weather, or a place to gather with your family and for smaller celebrations. So again, those are just a few ideas to get you thinking about, and then thinking about what this park could become, what feels right, what doesn't feel right. And if maybe you see something missing. So do let us know, take the survey. And we're super excited to see where we end up as we launch into the concept development after this open house.
And as we get into this kind of next, one of our, I think maybe our last, or one of the few last live poll links, we did have a question about just whether it mattered, whether it was the city park boundary or an urban growth area boundary or the unincorporated county boundary. At this point in our process, we just want to hear what you want to do, what you want to experience, what you think might fit. At the end of the day, our master plan will look at the whole site. Priorities, I think when you start getting into those boundaries and what exactly falls where, might start to have a sense in priorities and funding opportunities, but not really when you just think about what you'd like to do at the park. Who owns what is a little less important right now, and whose boundary it falls within. When you go to the park, you just know what you want to do and what you want to experience. So that's what we're looking for today. And Giselle?
Great, so I'll launch us into the last question. Right after I share my screen with you.
All the little details.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Some of you are already started. So if you've done one of these open houses in person before, you know that we love to give you dot stickers. And so today we're giving you one digital sticker to put on the category that's really speaking to you. You'll remember these titles from your rankings and priorities, and they include from top to bottom, left to right, conservation, environmentalism, space and amenities for passive or leisurely activities, accessible path trails and site furnishings, recreation, play and adventure, programming and events, and community gathering to round out the group. These are more just to get a general sense of what's resonating with people. You've seen more specifics in the image boards that Merritt shared. And of course, the more detailed comments that you all have been providing about where sidewalks don't exist, or which of the opportunity zones would be great for this activity or that, or charging stations or dog comments, all of those we're noting and will resurface with a little more detail in the survey, and of course, the next more concept level phase. So this is really just to see what's resonating with people today. Of course, if you aren't seeing the right question, if you don't mind refreshing, that is usually helpful, especially on this dot exercise. If your dot function's not working, you can always chime in the Q&A. That's a great place too.
We found some people had to click and hold to move the dot. Some people had to click on the photo that they wanted their dot. It was really.
Yeah, it's varied. It works across devices a little bit differently. And a few are still coming in, so we'll give it a minute. the passive leisurely space and the conservation notions are pretty strong here. But I will say the recreation play seems like it's getting more popular as we're moving through the presentation. So some of those inspiring images and nature-inspired play might be resonating with the group. This is great. Okay, I think with that, we can move back to the presentation. And as I mentioned, we will save these results and we can make them available, knowing that it's just a small snapshot of the whole city and a moment in time.
All right, so we have come to the more open Q&A portion of our session tonight. So many of you have already discovered our Q&A button and the ability to type in your questions. There's also, I don't know that the raise hand function, I think, might actually be disabled on this one. So please focus on that Q&A function and we'll kind of start taking some questions. Jen, I'm going to start us off in this discussion with a couple of questions that have really come up around access to the park. And there's been a number of questions as we've been going through this presentation of just comments and concerns about how access affects safety and security in the neighborhoods. Sort of, does it promote more vandalism or potentially more crime in the neighborhood? How is the security and the policing and the safety of the park going to be addressed by the city, at some point, if and when a park development occurs?
Yeah, so good questions about that. And, that would be one of the things at the front of my mind as well, especially if I live next to the area. We do already have a pretty big park system with parks that are adjacent to homes. That's where the parks, currently exist, and it is it's an ongoing partnership with neighbors, with police. We do have one of our police commanders that's on our city committee, that's on this project, that is weighing in. And we currently have a park security service that we contract out for, that helps us to be eyes and ears, in addition to our staff and neighbors. So this is definitely something that will need to be fleshed out as we go through the master plan process. And so we really appreciate all the comments about security and safety, because that's obviously super important. I mean, parks actually increase your home value if you live next to them. They also present some of the challenges that folks have brought up as well.
And then there was another, probably a good point, I'll just interject here. It is important to note the park is not open to the public now. So the city staff and a couple of our staff as well have been out there to kind of evaluate, to find the wetlands, to document where the creeks and the tributaries are. But as general public, it is currently closed to the public because there is not parking, there is not improvements, it is not being policed or monitored on a regular basis without those improvements. So if you start driving around to try and find where the park is, you might not recognize it right off the bat. So please be conscientious, I guess, of those neighbors around, as the park is not developed yet. There is Pleasant Glade Park. There is no parking specifically at Pleasant Glade Park. It is kind of intended more for that neighborhood access, but that is the only area that would be open to the public now. One of the related questions, Jen, maybe you can talk a little bit about, is just the dumping of trash along Carpenter Road. And then I think I saw some previous comments, just about addressing homelessness and transient activity in the park. It's kind of similar to the idea of security, but I guess different enough that maybe you can talk about that one specifically.
Sure. Yeah. So with the dumping of garbage, I mean, again, we have these issues already occurring in parks. And so we just address them as swiftly as we possibly can. Lacey takes a lot of pride in taking care of those types of issues right away, so that, it doesn't become a habit. If you see something dumped, a lot of people will dump more stuff. So just try to take care of that as quickly as possible. As far as the homelessness issue, I mean, I think everybody on this call understands that this is a national issue, and in some areas potentially a crisis. And so, the city of Lacey is working on solutions as well as we can. It's a very complex issue across the nation, like I said, and So the city, did you want me to tell what the city's doing for homelessness, or do you mean like as far as park rules?
I think
Regarding
as part of the park
homelessness.
rules, like, so, you know,
Yeah.
with this park, you know, and even before it's opened, I think as people now we're going to recognize that it's a park because we're having this process. Just what happens if people start to recognize this is a public park and, you know, try, you know, think that this is a place they can camp or try to camp out or just other activities that are unwanted, you know, even today.
Yeah, so again, I mean, we do have things that pop up in our park system. We have a park system of 1,200 acres, which includes all these properties, but some of the park rules help protect us from these types of things. And again, we just try to act as swiftly as we can. You know, if there is somebody who's identified as camping in the park, we'll often get an email with a detailed map and a circle on where the tent is from a neighbor. And we'll go right out there. Park maintenance addresses it immediately, pulls police in if they need to. It's against park rules to use the facility outside of standard park hours. So park hours are 7 a.m. until dark, unless otherwise posted. So no one's allowed to be in the park at night. And then the other rule that would come into play is erecting, maintaining, or occupying any temporary or inflatable structure, tent, or shelter without prior approval. So we do enforce the park rules, and like I said, whether it's help from someone who's visiting the park, help from a neighbor, or if it's one of our staff walking through and notices something, we just act swiftly on that.
There is, I'm going to take us in a different turn for a little bit. There was a comment from, I think it's, and I apologize if I completely mispronounce your names. So I'm taking some guesswork here, but there's a comment from Ruta Fanning. Ruta, I'm going to go ahead and click and see if you're interested in speaking with us directly. You had a comment here about just the wetlands and all of the natural wildlife. It sounds like maybe some concerns with how we might protect that and still have activities. We'll see if I was able to do this right. Are you able to unmute and maybe speak to us directly?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, we sure can.
Great. Yeah, we have a property that doesn't adjoin directly, but it's a 20-acre parcel, and it has like almost a 7-acre Class A wetlands. And we have everything from beavers to otters to every kind of duck. And I'm just looking at some of those pictures of people biking through there, off-leash dogs. That wildlife corridor is going to be gone. And that's a real concern because it's one of the few corridors that's left in the county. And so all of those grand plans about really developing and paving is going to be a big issue for me, and I think a big problem.
Great. I think that's kind of that balance that we talked about. And some of these uses we may find really don't fit very well. I think the value of the wildlife corridor and just the fact that it is a corridor is something we certainly recognize. We have started to look a little bit into, is there a smaller area that could be carved out for an off-leash that is, you know, protected and far enough away from all these other things? Like we said, it's just one idea of many. And so we're glad you can give us your feedback, and we do encourage everybody else to kind of offer some ideas on these things as well.
Can I make one more?
Yes.
Can I make one more point? There is a very large off-leash dog park right up there by the former Thurston County dump. And it's not that far away. It's very accessible. It's very large. People use it. Why would we need another one?
Great point. Thank you. I'm going to admit I'm great at letting people talk. Apparently, I'm not so good at handing the mic off to other people. So I'm going to ask for some help. If you can go ahead and turn off your mic, and then we'll see if maybe there's some other folks that had some good comments. I see it does promote some other comments I see coming in about wildlife and dogs that may or may not go together. There is a question here about will other park, and this is from Rick Kelling, will other park master plans be open for review based on the results of this effort? Rick, I'm going to give you the mic as well, if you can maybe chime in. I'm not sure if you mean other park master plans within the city as a whole or related to this project. You should.
Hey, yeah, thanks for taking my question. It's more for Jen, I guess, for other city park master plans as a result of this park's master plan development.
Not necessarily. So the Park board typically makes the work plan based on what the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan, states as the priorities. And so that's how that's how review of a master plan would come to be. And it's a really good point because the city does have some master plans of undeveloped spaces that are pretty old. And so I think that that's going to be something coming up on the park board's work plan to review some of those plans. But there's already, a work plan developed for this year and a lot of it already for next year. And we got put a little behind with COVID, as a lot of people did. So we just try to get to the projects as soon as possible. But I would say the other master plans that aren't in this planning area wouldn't be related to this process.
So
Great, thanks.
There is a question about the grant conditions that we talked about, the RCO that applies to the RCO
Oh, sure.
conversion areas. Maybe.
Yeah, and I have to apologize. Part of Pleasant Glade Park was actually purchased with RCO funding as well. So that should have been indicated on our map, and that is entirely my fault. So my apologies, but just to let everybody know, that should be on the map as RCO property as well. And so essentially what RCO wants to guarantee when you enter into an outdoor recreation agreement is that the land is used for outdoor recreation. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. And so they aren't supportive of indoor spaces going on to grant funded property. And now there are some exceptions made for restrooms or maybe small storage areas, those types of things that are necessary for people to come and do outdoor recreation. But they just really want to ensure from now into the future that those spaces are used for outdoor recreation. So the conversion area that you guys saw on the map is a 16.5 acre conversion due to an indoor project that was placed at another RCO funded property, which is Woodland Creek Community Park. And so the senior center was expanded, the Virgil Clarkson Senior Center was expanded, and that took, and that's an indoor facility, which took up outdoor space. And so that's what that conversion is. And that's why you saw that little sliver of property on the map as well. So that's just an example of, and the city did work with RCO. These types of things happen. I mean, it was, more affordable at the time and a good choice to expand the senior center. At that location, because it would have meant building an entirely different senior center at another location if the city didn't go that route. So sometimes it's for good reasons, but you just have to mitigate that. And so, but that's the gist, is that it's just used for outdoor recreation that can be active or passive. As long as it's for outdoor rec, then RCO is perfectly happy.
Yep. There's a question maybe to take a little bit different turn for a bit from Jeff Johnston. I'm going to go ahead and see if you want to ask your question live. I think you should be able to unmic. And it was regarding the roundabout. And I think sort of kind of in a broader sense, I assume this is sort of more about traffic and speeds along Carpenter. Do you want to ask your question, Jeff?
Sure. Hi, thanks for taking my question. Again, I saw that somebody typed in a response and a link to the Lacey transportation plan, but it was just whether or not there's going to be a roundabout at to deal with the intersection of Carpenter Road and Britton Parkway there, where Carpenter kind of jogs a little bit. That's a really dangerous intersection, so I was glad to see, and I'll take a look at the transportation plan, but I was glad to see that there is something in the works to deal with that intersection.
And then it might be a good time. There's another question, and I don't have the person right on the top of my my list here, but had asked about 31st Avenue and if that was still a real project, how that might come into Carpenter Road. Ashley, I know you or Jen maybe knows a little bit more about this. I believe it is a real project is sort of the short answer. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Correct. It is a real project. The intention is to connect the current 31st Avenue extension in the Gateway neighborhood all the way through to Carpenter Road. That is part of the city's long-term transportation plan, but it's not currently in design. So as Juliet mentioned, it could kind of jog through there. It could go straight through. That part hasn't been determined yet. And that'll be largely based on, wetland impacts in that area and that sort of thing. So it is coming, but not in the short term that we could give you a definitive year at this point.
Caroline Wood had a comment more than a question, but Caroline, I thought I'd give you the mic and see if you want to expand on that comment a little bit. I think it was kind of getting a little bit to that idea of a balance that we talked about. You had kind of a great point. Do you want to unmute and maybe offer your thoughts?
Yes, this is Caroline. I appreciate that you all are being planful and thoughtful and bringing everybody's mixed ideas and into the planning conversation. With 500 acres, you can accommodate a wide variety of interests for people, and we all recreate different, and we all have different ideas of what mixed use can mean. So just having a well-managed asset like this that's 500 acres, we can do a lot with that, and it's very exciting.
Thanks for the feedback. I'm going to jump to Sally, maybe Vogel is the last name, and see if you want to chime in here. There's been a lot of comments about just specific access points and connections to neighborhoods. It sounds like you've got some thoughts on that one. Do you want to share? Oops, let's try this again. Sally Vogel? Yeah, okay, now I can hear you now.
I live near a small area where the master plan had a road connecting two other roads, and we fought that and we prevailed, and it's now a nice natural area enjoyed by everybody. And I hope that this isn't a done deal, that 31st is going to just go right through the heart of that wild area. I hope they can come up with some other solution.
Okay, that's good feedback to hear as well. Thank you. Chris Porazzo, let's try that. See if I got that right. You had a comment about play areas.
Yes, I'm an early childhood educator, and I do not want to see metal in this beautiful environment. I would love to see, you showed a picture that it can just be as engaging as the other climbing structures, and please, I encourage that, and maybe a couple of creeks the kids can play in and experiment in would be wonderful. You know, easy to construct and cheap. So thank you for everything you guys are doing. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your thoughts on that too. Let's see, Eric Palmer, you had a question. Oops, let's see, people are jumping around on my ability to mute you. So hopefully, Eric, you were able to unmute yourself. You had a question about pedestrian and bicycle access.
Yeah, I think I actually live across town, and I do think the park should primarily serve the local neighborhoods, but it's also really close to the Chehalis Western Trail. And the road that goes across there, I forget what it is now, it's 41st or something, is not bicycle safe currently. It eventually connects to Pleasant Glade Road, which is rural enough to be safe. But I wonder if that could be included in the master plan. A vision to basically be a destination for the Chehalis Western Trail.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear kind of from the community where some of those larger connections can be. While our master plan is kind of going to be a little bit more insular in terms of what happens within the park, part of what we always do, as you saw with our connections, is think about how people can get to and from the park. There are definitely some questions about traffic and traffic analysis. That is part of what we take a look at when we think about parking and location and access. But the larger bicycle network, the larger trails planning network, how bikes get up and down Carpenter, as well as connect to it from other areas, is something that I know is part of the transportation master plan. But specific thoughts that I think relate to our park too are certainly welcome. Ashley, do you want to chime in here really quickly? Is that bike and ped network plan part of the transportation master plan or a different planning document?
It is a separate planning document. I can post that in the chat as well.
That'd be awesome. Thanks. I figured I was close, but maybe not quite.
And I'll chime in too. I think he might be talking about 26th from the Chehalis Western Trail, unless there's another connection.
I don't have the map in front of me, so it's there's a direct connection between Chehalis Western Trail and Pleasant Glade Road.
Yeah, it's about a mile yeah, the trailhead, the Chehalis Western Trailhead is 1 mile from Pleasant Glade Park.
Right, and that road has no paved shoulder or sidewalk or anything right now. I did check the bike pedestrian plan, and it was not flagged as a recommendation there. I suspect that the city didn't really incorporate the idea of the park being there yet.
Well, yeah, so one of the challenges obviously is that there are a lot of small county roads in the area. So definitely if something like that were to be a priority, would have to be coordinated with the county. And I know that the Thurston Regional Planning Council just updated a regional trails plan too. And so they're going to be sharing the results of that with us. And that's going to go before our park board at our next meeting. So I can take a look and see if anything's in there.
Okay, thank you.
So there are a couple of questions on the timeline of the park. I think we'll get to that in just a minute. Jenny Gessler, you had a comment here that I'm not sure we've completely addressed yet with some of our other questions. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? I think it's about more demand for development.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, dogs in the background. I just want to know you guys have purchased part of this property and then it was, left for park access, but what clear demand do we have? Have we proven there's clear demand for this and that it can't be left natural for the time being?
So really specifically related to kind of more the activities or programming of the park itself. There is, so I'll let Jen kind of answer for most of this in the minute here. There is a Parks, Recreation, and open space plan that is citywide that talks a lot about the need for various types of recreation facilities. And I'll caveat that to say that it doesn't say that needs to happen here at this park, but we do know that there is, when you look at what's available to the community, what's available to the neighborhood, the desire and the ability to use this for education and trails and to kind of recognize the value of it. Certainly there are areas that I think will want to stay protected and be devoid of those trails and access points for those priority habitat areas. But there is definitely some need that has been defined, and what we're hearing hopefully from the community is either additional need outside or since that planning document was developed. Jen, do you have some more to add to that?
Yeah, a couple of things. I know that there is demand in the Gateway area because that area has been developed and people would like to use that space. I guess it's area 5. And then in regards to area 3 and the conversion area, so going back to Merritt's question earlier about the RCO requirements, part of their requirement is that we do allow access. So we do need to figure out how to allow access in a safe manner for those parcels.
And how much more happens beyond that access, that's really a big part of what we want to hear from people today. Let's talk really quickly about the completion of the park. When might development occur? Where would funding come from? There's a couple of questions around those ideas. And I'll just start off by saying that the master plan itself, which we talked about, some folks may have missed the beginning part of this presentation. We have a series of 3 public meetings. This is the first. We'll have another one more midsummer, and then the last one kind of early fall. We will hopefully be done with our master plan process in the early part of 2022. At that point, the city can then look for funding, go after more of those RCO grants that we've been talking about to support some level of access and be able to open the park up for public access. Any future detailed design, so priorities of what should happen first at the park is part of our master plan process. Final design of any of those improvements or priority amenities and the funding of those is a future process. So Jen, maybe you can talk a little bit about that side of things.
Yeah, so we will be, of course, anxious to see the results of the master plan, which is, like Juliet said, will identify a feasible phase 1. Unfortunately, I can't give a very good timeline. I wish I could, but it's really going to come down to funding opportunities and partnerships can help too. I know that there's a lot of partnerships that can be explored to make things happen. Like an example I'll use is at Woodland Creek Community Park. We have a maintenance agreement with Puget Sound Disc Golf Association. And so, it's just an example of a group that we currently work with. Something that's really important to consider and makes this a little more challenging is maintenance and operation of anything that we develop. So it's one thing to raise the funds or apply for a grant to develop something, but it's that ongoing maintenance that is a puzzle piece that still needs to be figured out, because we obviously don't want to open something up that we can't afford to maintain. So therein lies the challenge. There are public funding options too. Some of you may recall in 2018, the city put forth a Metropolitan Park District proposal, or the city council did. And so that's an option for funding. And so there are different ways that it could come together.
And when I said at the beginning, it's a long-term plan, I really do mean long-term. Master plan is a year, future design, future funding, future implementation. So, you're more in that 5-ish year timeframe than you are in the next year or two, for example. Although, the idea usually with our master plans is to find some things that are more quicker improvements to get a park open, which is what RCO requires as part of that grant funding. What is that minimum improvement to get it open? What is the most important thing to be able to do? That's part of what we're hoping to hear from the community through this process. And then other things that could fall much more long-term. Ashley A's, I think I'm going to see if you would like to unmute yourself. You had a question about trailhead and parking, and I think it's indicative of a number of comments we've heard kind of tonight or typed into the Q&A about what those access points means and trailheads and what a trailheads means. Do you want to expand a little bit on your question?
Hi, yeah. So I live in the Woodland Creek neighborhood, which there was a previous comment that we don't have sidewalks and we don't have a park and our children play in the street. And I'm just wondering if this will have a parking area. There was a mention that there'd be a trailhead in Woodland Creek, the development. And if there is a parking area, where that may be, if you're that far in the planning and so on.
I guess I would turn the question around. Are you interested in parking and or restrooms and trailheads in your neighborhood? So that little dot we showed on the plan was just saying, hey, here's a potential chance to connect. Should we even look at this further? So I'm going to assume from your question and the way you presented it that you were interested in pursuing some sort of a connection to Woodland Creek.
I think a trailhead would be nice. There's one in Covington currently. Whether it's public or not, or supposed to be used, is left to be said. But there's not really any clear marking of the trail, parking, and that seems to be working at this point. But at the same time, would we like to get the kids out of the street and into a park? Yeah.
Okay. Richard, I think you just chimed in with maybe an opposing view. I think I just hopefully gave you the mic. Do you want to offer a different opinion on this one? Richard Montgomery.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we live in Covington Court at the end of the neighborhood here. And we actually would oppose having connected parking or trailhead or access here. It's a smaller community. There are multiple kids. I think most of the lots down here are pretty good size. So, yeah, I don't think you would find much traction in the neighborhood down here for it, just because of the increased traffic, people, parking, all of the above. I think there's better streets capable of handling that would tie into the other side of the park rather than coming down to our really dead-end neighborhood.
Cul-de-sac.
Yeah, it's a dead-end cul-de-sac.
And I think I'm seeing a couple of comments kind of chiming in quickly as you're talking too. And it does sound like a lot of the concern is around the traffic, like not necessarily a connection, but the traffic and the parking that a potential connection not done well might bring.
I think when you have increased traffic, you have increased incidents of crime or malicious activity, all the above. So I'm not going to say traffic as cars. I'm going to say traffic as people in general.
Okay. Let's see, Lorraine, let me see if I can find you, give you a heads up. Lorraine may have dropped off our meeting call. There was a question from Lorraine about the priority of recreation activity versus environmental preservation. I'm not seeing you on the call anymore, so if you are, chime in with another comment so we can find you. But I think you know, it is a really difficult balance to achieve. I think we've seen that with the pros and the cons. We've heard a little bit, maybe a bit more on the con side for an off-leash area. Certainly with trails and access to trails, where we kind of look through the comments, and some of the suggestions are both interested and excited about it, and also very concerned about the traffic and crime and other things that might come with it. The balance is an important part of just about every recreation activity in every park that we design and develop. And part of what we're going to do with this is we take the information we hear from tonight. We also will have our open the online survey, so we'll get more feedback from the greater Lacey community. And then we take all that feedback and we'll develop some different options. And so some of those options intentionally start to look at what that balance should be, and sometimes even skewing that balance a little bit. So one might have a little bit more programming or events or areas for people to gather. The other might be skewed very much towards the preservation and a minimalistic approach to the park site. And there might be something in between. The idea is to really start to get that discussion going. It's easy. Some people really do have lots of ideas that they can provide to us, and other people sometimes really need to see what it would look like to really understand if it's something they're concerned about or not. And sometimes they think they're all for it, and then you see it on a piece of paper and they go, whoa, this is not what I thought. And so as we come back with that second public meeting, we'll be showing you these ideas, and we'll be showing you what it looks like. What is a trailhead? What is a connection? How big or small might it be? And what are some of the things we can do through design and through environmental, so it's called crime prevention through environmental design. A lot of the techniques we use to help reduce and mitigate for some of those concerns that we've heard tonight. And so that'll help us really kind of have continue that discussion for what that balance should be. And we certainly don't have an answer for it tonight, but I'm glad that people are thinking in terms of the balance, because we're going to probably be using that word an awful lot through this process. So with that, let's see, Joseph Reinhardt, I saw a question come up. Let me see if I can find you if you're still here and give you the mic. Do you want to talk? Definitely more towards the environmental side of that balance that I was just mentioning. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and offer your perspective?
Yeah, am I unmuted now?
You are.
Okay. Yeah, living in Northeast Lacey, we've seen tremendous amount of development and environmental destruction. And this area that you're discussing, I think, is one of the last pristine areas left in Lacey. And I would love to see it be available for people to enjoy. And I'm so afraid that it's going to be another area where more destruction takes place. If we talk about overdeveloping it when you talk about recreational facilities, I hope that is more not in the nature of building concrete structures and putting roadways and things, but really keeping it environmentally sound and allowing people to enjoy the beauty and the quiet and the peacefulness that's there and the remaining forested areas that we have.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a good perspective. There was one specific question, I think it was maybe answered online, but other folks might still be interested and not recognize the answer. Really quick one, probably for you, Ashley. It says, any consideration for lowering the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit on Carpenter Road?
Yes, so we alluded to that a little bit in the chat, but that Carpenter Road is currently part of Thurston County. So that's not a decision that the city could make alone without, collaborating with them. It's definitely some feedback that we'll take, and we're looking at those connection points that Juliet mentioned for park access in the future. There is also a future Carpenter Road improvements planned as part of Thurston County's transportation plan. So I encourage you to take a look at that as well. And we'll be able to get kind of more information on what that looks like as they move further into their process.
Great, thank you. I want to see if Caroline Wood is on the call. I'm going to go ahead and see if you want a mic. I know we answered your question online a little bit too, but for those who maybe aren't looking at the answers, I think you had maybe a different view. If you want to kind of repeat your comment to the larger audience.
I've kind of chimed in on a few things. I wanted to participate. Was about the
sporting dogs upland. I'm not sure what scent work means, so I'd love to hear more about that.
It's just a way to use pristine or preserved space in a way that allows recreation to happen for people that do have dogs. For example, I go to Scatter Creek with my sporting dog just to do nose work, to train on scent, hiding things, letting her go find. It doesn't necessarily mean that you would want to do hunt tests in that size park, but it's a way for you to bring clubs and events to the community. And I think that upland space in the center, being conservation minded, it's a good fit for those types of recreation opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering what that was. That helps an awful lot.
Yeah, I mean, right now I drive up to Fall Cities just to do something that really could be nicely done in that kind of space.
There was also a question, I think from someone who was maybe late jumping in, about a recording of the presentation. So I'll just remind everybody for the good of the whole group. The recording itself is not intended to be posted online, so people can feel free to really have that conversation without necessarily having it posted afterwards, but we will have the presentation available. So you'll be able to go in and see the presentation. And then what we will also do is we'll take the comments and answers that we hear tonight and any that we don't get to in our time tonight, and we will post those as part of a summary. So you won't necessarily hear the live recording through the whole length of it, but you'll have all of the same content available. The posting of the presentation you should see pretty immediately, probably by tomorrow. The question and answer and sort of a summary of what we think we heard from this meeting will follow usually a week or so later as we take some time to really digest and analyze everything as a whole. Let's see, I think we had answered most of the questions. Sean, I think your question is on, let's see, John, let's get you listed here, see if you want to talk. I think your question is on the actual online survey. You may have already found the link and started to take it. John Mauger, let's see, let's try it again. Do you have an ability to unmute yourself?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at the survey and there's a error in the survey, so I can't continue until it's fixed.
And that's on question 5. Is that what I understand? Or did you encounter an error somewhere else?
I didn't continue. So yeah, at 5.
Did it just not, so it didn't allow you to continue?
No, I just stopped because I want to answer the question, but I can't because it's not working.
Okay. So if you want to type into this the specific answer, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I do know what you mean when I think I know what you mean when you say set to matrix instead of the single row rating scale, but we will go take a second look at it. There are lots of different ways to set up these questions. And so if kind of the wrong button got flipped, we'll take a second look.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anything else in specific that you did want to convey to us though in the meantime?
No, I agree with the person who said that you're not going to get a lot of traction with Woodland Creek estate residents. I think that's
Okay.
probably true.
All right, sounds like we have a lot of folks from that neighborhood on the call tonight, so I appreciate that. Craig McDaniel, I'm going to go ahead and give you the mic, and it sounds like maybe there's still some question about access to the park. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? I know we sort of answered it, but maybe not quite didn't answer the right question. You should be able to unmute Craig if you're still on. All right, so if there's anybody else on that would have a question about access or the ability to access the park currently, or the state of the current park, go ahead and type it in. Oh, let's see, no mic. I might have missed you in there, so I apologize that. Oh, that you don't have a mic, gotcha. So Jen, if you could, it looks like the question is the park currently off limits? Is it no trespassing? Are people not allowed in it?
Which one? Okay, so yeah, the only one that has allowed access right now is Pleasant Glade Park. Again, I think you mentioned it earlier, there's no parking. So you're not able to park on the street because it's just a narrow county road and there is no developed parking lot. And so it's a bike to or walk to neighborhood style park. I will say the terrain is pretty rough in Pleasant Glade. There's I think you showed a picture of the picnic table and you can see like the park rules sign and there's a little bit of a trail and that's pretty much all the like level portion of the park. The rest of it, there is access, but it's pretty bumpy to walk on. Like, I wouldn't recommend if you have any type of mobility issues.
All right, I think I'm going to let this go a little bit. If you guys have some other questions, I am seeing most of our questions, at least the direct one, answered. If there is something you feel like maybe we didn't address as thoroughly as you would like, you can put that back in as the Q&A and we can give you the mic and you can expand a little bit further. I am seeing some questions and just some comments generally, both for off-leash and against off-leash. I'm certainly seeing some comments about trails and the potential conflict between trails. I think that probably goes to say the same with concerns that people might have with conflict between just park uses in general. If you're going to allow mountain bikes, you certainly want to keep it separate from where the environmental areas are, and your accessible trails and your mountain bike trails aren't really the same trails, so that you can kind of keep the folks safe who are expecting to use those different facilities. A lot of planning and master planning process is about those. It's about trying to define the program that people would like to see or not see. But it's also about the relationship of that program to both the environment and to other elements within the park. The success of those facilities and amenities can really depend on that relationship to each other, so that you're not putting trails within a creek buffer, or your bridge, if you're going to connect, clearly connects and protects the habitat that you're trying to protect while allowing people across it in a safe way. So that is certainly a big part of I think what we're going to be looking at with these different activities. I think there's a comment that just popped up about mobility issues. I think some of the photos that Merritt showed really were important in terms of thinking about the different level of use. And I think I would encourage people to think about that also in terms of parking. So there is a lot of different abilities and ages, a lot of different of people interested and who certainly can benefit from experiencing and understanding a park of this scale. Access to those trails, access to the educational opportunities. Sometimes that does rely on some parking for accessibility. Not saying that that's all in the neighborhoods, for example. But as we go through this process, it is always really helpful to think about how you use the park, how grandma uses the park, how your neighbor and their 5 kids uses the park, or those animals that are just like kids to some people as well as children. I think there's so many different hats that we wear in our lives and that we experience in different stages of our life. And so think about those people, think about your neighbors, talk to neighbors and friends, and really think about what the long-term character of this park should be. I will also say for our attendee who was found everything and took the survey, you can go back in. Question 5 is fixed. So thank you very much for pointing that out to us, and in particular before we even finished the call. So I love the enthusiasm. Go back in and please go through it. And if you do have any other issues with it, let us know. But I am told by our staff that the question has been fixed. Is there any topic that we haven't covered, Jen, Merritt, Giselle, Ashley, anything that we, or that you saw in the questions and the discussion that maybe we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I was going to let you know that our public affairs staff have already posted the presentation on the website. So that I got that note in. So thank you for that. I just feel real appreciative that everybody showed up. This was great participation and a lot of really great input. And you know, this property is for the residents, the people in Lacey. This is for you. So you know, we really value your input and encourage you to share with friends. And like Juliet mentioned, you know, talk with friends and neighbors and really think about a vision of what you want this part of Lacey to look like.
I saw someone who had a quick question. So Craig, do you want to ask your question? Oh, actually, if I remember right, you might not be able to have a mic on. So I'll read the question. Question was, is horseback riding a consideration? Jen, I'm going to kick this one to you. I don't know what kinds of policies are around horseback riding from the city's perspective.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely great to get that input if that's something that people are wanting. Checking our park rules right now.
Not often you have a park this size to even think about horseback riding like this, so we might have to get back to you on that one.
So yeah, animals currently must be leashed and in designated areas. So the current park rules don't support that. But you know, again, the input is valuable and appreciated, and it's something we can definitely review.
So most of you should see on your screen our next steps. So our hidden survey link, which you can now take, you can see it here with the code, so similar to our live polling. This is the link to the online survey. The survey will stay up through the end of the month. This is what we really, as much as we appreciate your input and your direct feedback, it does help us hear it from you directly. It really gives us context, gives us more insight into the thought process when you make a comment and have a discussion with us. So we, as Jen said, we really appreciate you joining us tonight. And having said that, the data is also important. So if you could please go online, take the survey. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, maybe 7 to 10 tops. It should be pretty short. You'll see some very similar questions. Please bear with us and go ahead and answer them again. They are phrased a little bit differently. And then you can scan the QR code. You can go to the link that you see here. You can continue to stay informed with updates on the website. The survey and the link to the survey will and I believe is potentially already up on that website. And then if you have any other questions, certainly please continue to reach out to the city so we can get those answered. It is a fairly long process, right? So we will come back to you again. We'll have 2 more public meetings. As I said, the next meeting is intended to show you ideas on like pen to paper and show you what it looks like to have a trail where it might go, what public access might be. If it's an educational center, what does that look like? How big would it be? Where would it go? How do we protect the rest of the environment while we are considering these different programmatic activities? So that's really the challenge to us that we take away as part of this process. And then we'll bring it back to you in that second meeting so you can tell us how well we listened, how well we interpreted what you told us both tonight and on the survey, and translated that into a design. And then from there, we will then refine, we'll take your feedback and come up with a preferred alternative, something that sort of is usually a mix and match or a hybrid of the previous alternatives with some additional comment and feedback. That'll be that third open house. And then we move from there into a final master plan. So please continue to participate. We are super hopeful we'll get to have something in person, maybe a pop-up, maybe a station at one of the other events once we're able to have them. So check back often. And if you're not signed up for that newsletter, that's going to be a really easy way for you to also get emails. Jen, do you want to offer any closing remarks?
Gosh, just thanks again. Public Affairs did confirm that the survey link and the presentation slides are on the website now. So yeah, just really appreciate your attendance and your participation. And we look forward to working with you moving forward with this project. So, and also want to thank HPB and Burt Consulting as well. And also Pat Skillings Connolly, some of the sub-consultants on this project. You guys have just done a great job for the city and for the city residents. So thank you very much.
Great. With that, if there are no other questions, we will let you go tonight. And yeah, please take that survey. Thank you very much for coming.